It's NBA Draft Early Entry Withdrawal Day, and still no word from either Ugonna Onyenso or Coleman Hawkins. I'm so tired of waiting.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch, and a big shout out to all you everydayers out there, as well as all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. Welcome on in. If you're joining us for the first time or a repeat guest, we'd love to have you as an everydayer or love to have you in the Locked On Tar Heels Discord channel. It's a great place to be, very seriously. Coming up on the show today, I already said it, but the withdrawal deadline is tonight. We're going to talk about that. Also, kind of look ahead in recruiting. Does Carolina have a legitimate shot at landing one or both of the Boozer twins? Men's golf unfortunately fell short on Tuesday, and seemingly everyone is betting against the Diamond Heels at their own risk, I would say. Let's get right into it with the early entry withdrawal deadline. It has been a long time from the end of the season to this point, but finally, we will know when we wake up on Thursday, essentially, who will be playing in college next year and who's going to keep their hat in the proverbial NBA draft ring. Rosters won't yet be complete, obviously, but this is the second and final big deadline in knowing what and who will be available in the pool of players for next year for teams trying to finalize their rosters. And so North Carolina is obviously one of those who is maybe done, but maybe looking for more. And so we will keep our eyes keenly on what happens throughout the day today and anything that trickles out later. So of those two final big steps I mentioned, obviously the first of those was the closing of the transfer portal 30 days after Selection Sunday. And so we kind of knew at that point a cutoff on who was staying home and who wasn't. But then tonight, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So that's the key time. That is the deadline for early entry NBA draft people to formally withdraw from the draft. And I mean, they can take it right down to the deadline as long as you're in by, before the clock strikes midnight on turning into Thursday, you're good. Now, here's what we need to be aware of. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will hear every name, because if a player late tonight submits paperwork, it might not come out, and the paperwork has to go through all the things it's got to go through before it becomes public. Like, the player might let us know, but just keep in mind that even when you go to bed tonight, there still might be a few more names that trickle out tomorrow on Thursday or even on Friday, perhaps. Now, you will see, don't be confused by this. There is a deadline that is still out there for an NBA draft withdrawal. That deadline, I believe, if I remember correctly, is 10 days prior to the draft. Don't pay any attention to that one for our purposes. That one is essentially just for international players to withdraw. If you want to maintain collegiate eligibility, NCAA eligibility, today's the day. That's why it's got to happen that way. So that said, since the clock strikes midnight, or by the time, I guess I should say, the clock strikes midnight in the Eastern time zone tonight, we should know about Coleman Hawkins, and we should know about Ugonna Onyenso and others. But for now, still nothing on either one of these guys. And it's really, really interesting to me that they're both taking this thing, I mean, literally right down to the deadline. This is the day of, and still nothing. We know from things that both of these men have said that their desire would be to stay in the draft. But here's the thing. Desire doesn't always necessarily meet reality, right? Like, I desire to go to the moon, but I'm not an astronaut, and that's not reality. I mean, I guess it could have been a long time ago when I could have trained for it, but it's not. So just because their desire is to stay in the draft doesn't mean that's the wisest or best decision for them. And so today is going to be a day of last-ditch efforts. Can I get a guarantee? can I get a guaranteed contract? Not just a guarantee like I'm going to get drafted 55th, because you probably don't care if that's the deal, but a guarantee of a guaranteed contract from a certain team. Here's the problem. Even for teams, it's hard for them to commit to certain things because they don't know how the draft plays out. What if somebody that seemed like they were going to be a top 2 or 3 draft pick falls to 15, and now I want to take them, and so I'm not going to take player X that I had made a guarantee to, right? Like that is the risk you take in entering your name into this thing if you're not a surefire draft pick. So that's where both of these guys are at. I wouldn't be surprised if they and their camps have been doing everything to look into guaranteed NBA draft picks, if they've been looking into all the NIL possibilities that are out there for them, and then ultimately got to make a decision. And so we'll see what happens throughout Wednesday. Obviously we always post the show at 3 a.m. Eastern time on audio, and I usually put it on YouTube for 10 a.m. I'm going to do it for like 7 or 8 o'clock when I get done recording this, just in case one of them announces early in the day on Wednesday so that you can catch it on YouTube earlier than them announcing it. Now, a couple others that I'm still keeping an eye on as well. We had talked about throughout this whole process. One of the names is JT Toppin, a New Mexico transfer, kind of a small ball 5. I really like a lot of what he brings to the table. But he announced on Tuesday that he was pulling out of the draft and going to Texas Tech. So that option is not a thing. We in fact did a segment on this guy, is Jameer Watkins from Florida State, whom, man, he is tantalizing to me. I think he is going to stay in the draft ultimately, but that's another name we're watching for. Also watching for surprises. Is there anybody who, maybe we thought was going to come back to school that decides to stay in the draft kind of inexplicably, or maybe because it's a weak draft and it's like, hey, this is my shot, I might as well stay in. Or are there any surprises the other way? Like, we thought this guy was a surefire, he's going to stay in, and he's coming back. Probably because there's a big bag waiting on him somewhere. That's the thing. So keep your eyes out for all of that today. For me, of all these possibilities, I didn't think I would ultimately land here. But as I think about the Van Allen Lubin addition, I just keep coming back to the one guy that makes the most sense with what Carolina still needs is Ugonna Onyenso and his rim protection and his size. That is unlike anything Carolina has. I know, he is not as polished. He's not as good or as experienced an all-around player as Coleman Hawkins is, but this isn't always about best all-around player. So often it's about fit and need. And for me, and for a lot of you out there, I know because we've talked about it, Ugonna Onyenso seems to fit that. So you would certainly take other players if the fit is right and matches everything else that Hubert Davis and staff are looking for. But I'm watching keenly, specifically the Onyenso decision today. And ultimately, if he pulls out, do Carolina conversations continue? Does he go to somewhere like Rutgers? That's been another big rumored possibility as well. We'll keep our eyes on all of that. Now, projecting ahead another year to the class of 2025, 2 of the most heralded prospects in the class are twin brothers, the sons of Duke legend Carlos Boozer. But Carolina is hotly pursuing both of these guys. Is that reality or just a pipe dream for Hubert Davis? We'll talk about that coming up in just a minute. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. How about some College World Series odds that are out now? Tennessee, the number 1 overall seed, leads the way plus 500, followed by Texas A&M plus 600, Kentucky and Arkansas plus 1,000, and then North Carolina, Wake Forest, and LSU all plus 1,600. So if you want to get in on that action or anything else around the country that's happening right now, visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. For those of you that don't pay much attention to high school basketball recruiting, you need to know The names Cameron Boozer and Cayden Boozer. They're two of the most highly sought after players in the class of 2025, rising seniors for next academic year. And if that last name sounds familiar, it's because they are indeed and in fact the sons of Duke legend Carlos Boozer. Now, let's not kid ourselves. For anyone other than Duke to land these two young men, these twins, by the way, it's going to take a Herculean effort and a perfect recruiting pitch to outduel Jon Scheyer and the Blue Devils. But I love Carolina's pursuit of them. I love the chutzpah from Hubert Davis to say, I'm not conceding these two guys to Jon Scheyer and to my arch rival. Even if Carolina doesn't land them, I love what this signals to people, that Hubert Davis will recruit against anybody at any time, anywhere, even in the face of what seems like silly odds, right? Now, some of you, and I get this argument, would look at that and say, then it's a waste of time and resources for him to go after these guys. I totally hear that argument. I just want to put forth my belief and my opinion that I love this. I think it's just shows that Hubert Davis is like, no, I can get these dudes. But also the reality that they've been pretty vocal, the twins have, that it is not a done deal to Duke. Nor, by the way, is it a done deal that they are a package deal. All the more so, that says to me, all right, legitimately, if these two dudes continue to say over and over and over again, I did a show on them last summer. We talked about a similar thing. They've continued to say that and reaffirmed it to Sam Lance of the Zags blog. I'm looking for the tweet on that. Forgive me as I look for it. Yes, Sam Lance tweeted that, quote, Cameron and Cayden Boozer confirmed again with zagsblog.com that they are not necessarily a package deal when it comes to choosing a school. They will do what's best for them individually, end quote. Here's part of it. They're not like identical twins who do everything exactly the same. Cameron is the higher rated player. He's number 2 at every recruiting service across the board in the class of 25, behind only generational player AJ Debonsa. And then Cayden is a point guard. He's 6'3" and runs those kind of things. He's like 16 in the composite rankings. And so it's really interesting to me. But when you hear that quote confirmed yet again, that they are not like necessarily a package deal, this is another part of why I think it's worth Hubert Davis and the staff continuing to pursue these young men. You just don't know in this day and age, either initially, like coming out of high school, or if one of them comes back around in the transfer portal later on down the road, that you might be able to land them. We're starting to see some of those rivalry lines drop away where, you know, Carolina has some football players from NC State now, right? Like that's a real thing. And so while, yes, Carlos is Duke royalty, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that one of his sons could be a Tar Heel. That's the world we live in. Jaron Stevenson, Tar Heel by blood. His mom played for the Tar Heels, goes to Alabama because it makes more sense with fit and playing time and other things like that. You know what Duke gets on their roster year after year after year. And if they look at that and they're like, that doesn't make sense for me, then come on down to Chapel Hill. We'd love to have you. Now, I think it would be hilarious if one of them picked Duke and one of them picked North Carolina. How fun would that be? Pretty crazy storyline and would just be another wild chapter in the rivalry, right? Like insanely so. But you think about a world, a realignment world in which, what if Carolina and Duke don't wind up in the same conference? That is very much a reality. And then all the more so, you think about these two young men playing potentially at different places. So a couple updates specifically for Cayden Boozer, the point guard of the Twins. He himself, while Cam is the more heralded of the two, Cayden is an elite 5-star player himself. 6'3", 190. Again, he's ranked 16 in the composite rankings, 14th at ESPN, 17 at 247, 21 at Rivals, 24th at On3. He's ranked the third point guard in the class overall. And in this blog post from Zag's blog, he names the 5 schools that are currently recruiting him the hardest. Note, this is not a final 5 that he's narrowed it down to. Just here's who's really, really coming after me right now. But this is who he's naming, so that's not nothing. Those 5 schools: Miami, and if that sounds like an outlier, the Twins play for Christopher Columbus High School in Miami, so it makes a ton of sense that Larrañaga and his staff would be in on him. Listen to these 2 names, they make a bunch of sense: Kentucky and Arkansas. Yes, there you go. That's the John Calipari connection. Arkansas would be an outlier if it were not for Coach Cal being there now. And then the other 2 of those 5 are the Duke Blue Devils, and yes, your North Carolina Tar Heels. Cayden Boozer has named them as one of the 5 schools most hotly pursuing him. I love it. In this article, in his blog post, he discussed each of these 5 schools. I just want to quote for you what he said about North Carolina in case you haven't seen it. Quote, "They have a lot of good guards," and just talked about current kind of players. RJ Davis, Elliot, Cadeau, all those guards are really good. They help their guards play well, meaning North Carolina, and they produce a lot of wins because of those guards. So I feel like it's a great play style for a guard. On Hubert Davis, Cayden Boozer said, quote, "He's just a great coach, a good person to talk to. He's one of the best coaches in college right now." Yeah. So it's always good to talk to him, a coach like that, end quote. In fact, the article mentions 3 key factors in Cayden, specifically Cayden's recruiting, will be how coaches take care of their players, trust in the head coach, and development. Now, I don't know enough about Jon Scheyer personally to speak to how he takes care of his players. It seems like he does a good job, but ain't nobody keeping up with Hubert Davis in love and care of their players. Who out there is demanding their players to come meet with him every week one-on-one so that he can know them and they can know him? Like, I just don't see a world in which Jon Scheyer or anyone else goes to the level that Hubert Davis does from a relational standpoint. Trust in the head coach, development. He would get all of that at North Carolina. And by the way, as somebody that's probably been in not only his father's shadow, but his bigger brother's shadow most of his life, and I mean bigger from a stature standpoint, wouldn't it be interesting to get out from under his shadow and go make a name for yourself more than, hey, we're the Boozer twins? It's a possibility, right? And again, they have said we might split up. And so Cam Boozer, I could see that being a real thing. Now, he has taken a couple official visits already. 3 of those 5 schools on his list. He's been to Duke on an official, Miami on an official, and Kentucky on an official when Coach Cal was still there. He's also taken an official to Florida, but didn't mention them in the 5 that have been recruiting him. So keep that in mind. And then Cameron Boozer also had some quotes about North Carolina and really respecting. I won't read the whole thing to you, but again, high praise for the North Carolina program, high praise for Hubert Davis. It's clear that the North Carolina name and brand and coaches, importantly, and style of play all mean something to these young men. They get it. And in a day and age when loyalty to the school on the front of the jersey isn't as big a deal, just keep your eye on it, man. How rad would that be? I would love it. And would we troll Duke so hard if we landed a Boozer twin? We'll see. Way to go, Hubert Davis. Go get these young men. All right. The baseball team is gearing up for the regional that starts on Friday, just, 2 days away from now. And I tell you, there's a lot of people out there picking LSU, the reigning national champions, to be the ones to leave this regional as the winners. I don't want to hear another word of that. And we'll talk about it in just a second. Back in our FanDuel read, you heard me read some College World Series odds. Tennessee plus 500 makes a ton of sense, number 1 overall seed. Texas A&M plus 600 makes a ton of sense, number 3 overall seed. Kentucky makes a ton of sense, number 2 overall seed at plus 1,000. Arkansas makes a ton of sense, 5th overall seed at plus 1,000. North Carolina plus 1,600, 4th overall seed, makes a ton of sense. But in this list, You also get LSU. Same odds for the College World Series as the Tar Heels. LSU is the number 2 seed in their same region, in North Carolina's region, and they are above so many of the other region hosts with their College World Series odds. And I get it. Look, LSU is playing hot baseball right now. They had a terrible start to SEC play, but man, they're stepping it up. Have been playing lights out lately. But the disrespect to what North Carolina has done and is still doing is wild to me. And I get it. LSU brings in, they're very talented. They've got good and deep pitching. They've got some hitters. They've got a hitter that Carolina saw last year from NC State. But it's also disconcerting. Not only is it annoying to see LSU that high, it's disconcerting to me because odds makers are not wild and they're not crazy. Are they onto something? I do worry about that a little bit. Also, FanDuel has odds to win the regional. Look how good LSU's odds are. UNC obviously favored -125. LSU's though +115. That's not that long of odds. Wofford +1,000, LIU +4,000. Something with this though, and I talked about this some yesterday. Wofford is a really good baseball team. They've got a dude at the top of their starting rotation. They're a great hitting team. Let's not write off that they could beat LSU in game 1 and send them to the losers bracket. And not that Carolina could lose to Long Island. That's a reality as well. But LIU per RPI is the second worst team in this entire field of the 64. So there's good there as well. But just about everywhere I've looked is predicting this LSU upset. And a lot of times, here's what you hear like in March Madness. I got to predict an upset somewhere. This team's hot. Why not LSU upsets North Carolina? I feel like I've read and heard a lot of that since the field was released on Memorial Day. So while, yes, this is a rough draw for North Carolina, while, yes, I would feel a lot better about it if there were 2 guys that were going to be starting on the bump this weekend for North Carolina named Jake Knapp and Folger Boaz. Yeah, absolutely. But they're not. But this North Carolina team is at the Bosch, where they are 32-2 this year. This North Carolina team has a guy named Vance Honeycutt back that they didn't have last year come postseason time. This North Carolina roster has a lineup up and down through it that is bonkers. And while LSU has some good pitching at the top, and they do, there ain't nobody like Chase Burns coming at him, and Carolina has seen this dude and dealt with him twice. So, I mean, I feel like the Tar Heels are just sitting and waiting like, yes, keep betting against us, everybody. Also, quite frankly, remember Tommy White, the freshman that everyone couldn't shut up about last year from NC State? You know where he plays now? LSU. I relish this. Let's shut that dude down. Also, quite frankly, I'd also like to shut up the nation about the SEC and blah, 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 and 11 teams in the tournament. And aren't they so great? It's kind of like everyone with the Big 12 in basketball. It's like, dude, the ACC is just not getting the respect it deserves, it feels like. And so Carolina knocking off the reigning national champs would be awesome. I would love to see it. Now, so we'll keep getting geared up for that and getting ready for it. Remember, first pitch for the Tar Heels, 6:00 on Friday night. LSU and Wofford will play the earlier game at noon. A pretty cool stat I saw. I wish I could remember the Twitter account that put this out, but there were only 12 schools in all of Division I that this academic year made a bowl game, made the NCAA tournament in men's basketball, and made the NCAA tournament in baseball as well. Let me give them to you alphabetically. Alabama, Arizona, Clemson, Duke, James Madison, way to go. Kentucky, North Carolina, NC State, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas, and Texas A&M. Conference-wise, and obviously I need to use last year's conferences because that's where all these schools still were. That's one Sun Belt team. James Madison, how about you? One Big 12, 2 Pac-12s, 4 SEC schools, and 4 ACC schools. By the way, 3 of which are from the state of North Carolina. That's one of those few times when you're like, yeah, Tar Heels, Duke, NC State, what's up, everybody? Nice to see it. Glad we're here. I didn't see the Big Ten anywhere on that list because there's not a school. I see the ACC matching the SEC on this list in depth of what they bring. The ACC disrespect in multiple sports boggles my mind. I am on record as saying I get it if Carolina needs to move on. And I think the Big Ten is the most logical landing spot. But man, I hope we can hold on to the ACC. I'm too nostalgic. I'm too traditional, I guess, but I really hope it can stick around. All right. Sad news on Tuesday. Men's golf lost to Florida State in the match played, the quarterfinals. The score was 3-1, one unfinished match. It sounds lopsided when you hear it that way, but Carolina very well could have won this thing. The Tar Heels were winning the one unfinished match with like 3 holes to go, looking good. And you hate to say it, but the one that really hurts is Austin Greaser lost. And at the beginning of his round, he won holes 2, 3, and 4 to go up by 3 holes. And then they tied the first hole. He won the second hole and led throughout like the first 14 holes other than hole 1 where it was tied. And then the poor guy after that lost holes 14, 15, 16, and 17 to go from up 2 to down 2, and that's it. Had Austin Greaser just done what he does and held on, Carolina very well could have moved on to the semifinals, but it just wasn't meant to be. The wild thing, kind of the frustrating thing, is that none of the teams that finished stroke play 1, 2, 3, and 4 won their quarterfinal matchup. The semifinals was 5 seed Florida State against 8 seed Georgia Tech and 6 seed Auburn against 7 seed Ohio State. Isn't that weird and wild? So you got to feel like if Carolina could have advanced, man, it was there. Oh, it was there. I hate it for these guys who were in this position for the 4th time and just really hoping to break through. It's kind of like women's tennis, who finally broke through and won that national championship last year. Also, last note on today, a club sports update. Club sports, Isaac, what are you doing? Just go with me here. North Carolina women's ultimate frisbee is a club sport, but you talk about all these teams at North Carolina that are just running over everyone all the time. The women's ultimate frisbee team is at the top of that heap right now. UNC Pleiades just won on Monday their 4th straight ultimate college championship. They right now are on a 19-game winning streak. Here's the wild thing. In their last 171 games, they are 168-3. That is a dynasty. Way to go, women's ultimate frisbee team. You love to hear it. Or just ultimate team. That's the way to say it. All right, gang, we will keep updating things as we learn more on Wednesday about who pulls out and who stays in the draft. We'll update that later on throughout the week. So thanks for joining today. If you're not subscribed to the show, make sure you do that on both audio and video. If you haven't hit the bell notification on YouTube to get notified when I go live or when a premiere is coming up, you want to do that. That way you get a notification, you just tap right in, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Come join the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. The link for that is in the show notes, both for video and audio. You just click the link and it takes you right there. You sign up. It's free to join. Come for the Tar Heels. Stay for the great community. We'd love to have you. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow on Thursday, but until then, peace.